Welcome, everyone. I am Nathan. He is Raymond. And we are the Super Infodump Brothers from another mother.
Welcome once again. I'm here with my friend Nathan and our regular guest, Joseph Holmes.
Hi.
Welcome back, buddy.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Your intro always makes me smile.
It's a fun intro. Like, Nathan was reluctant to be the main voice, but I was like, no, you have to do it.
Nathan is the most talented, reluctant person I know.
Yes, he is. Okay, so making a movie is hard work, and it is awesome. Like, it is something that, like, once you do it, and it's like, even like directing a little short film, like, which it's the experience that I've had so far. It, like, all the little things that you have to prepare for, like the script, the working together with the other people in the project, the actors, the set, like the noises in the background, from every single problem that can arise in a project like this. You did it. You made a movie, and it's out there, and anyone can watch it. It's on. You can buy it or rent it on Amazon Prime, and I think other places, right?
Apple, Google Play, YouTube.
So, yeah, if you haven't watched it, our friend Joseph Holmes has released this movie called Jim versus the Future, and it's fun. It's a fun movie. Like I said to him when it was released, it really is what I love in like a movie. It's just like sci-fi, Christmas, like themes about the existentialism, the future, multiverse, basically like all together in one package, and it is fun. It is a fun ride.
It's got that dark schmaltz that you both love so much.
Yes.
See, that's what Nathan shared. He told me a while back that my aesthetic, like the kind of art that I enjoy, is dark schmaltz, and I've never been able to forget that. It really is perfect.
But yeah, I think it's awesome, and just to begin with everything, how was that process, Joseph? Like, how did this concept in your head begin?
Yeah, well, the concept began with what I like to call desperation, because I had another script that I've been working on for a while. I've been trying to make another movie, and it became apparent to me, and by it became apparent, my Overthinkers co-host Nathan Clarkson sat me down and said, "You do not have the money to make this movie. Like, the amount of money that you have, it just does not fit what you put in the script. So you either have to really change the script, or you have to make a completely different movie." And so I made a completely different movie, and I sat myself down. I mean, he said, "Look, you have enough money for 5 actors maximum and 1 location." And so I was like, okay, what story can I come up with that's 5 actors and 1 location? And so I just sat down and I wrestled with what that could be and what things were interesting to me. And I came up with this idea of a home invasion that deals with, philosophy and existential questions and faith, and the multiverse started coming into that. What are the ways that you can explore these ideas that are important to me and that I don't see being shown on film? And I've always had this idea that, the way we as a society talk about people's choices and the way that those choices matter, and if they matter, is kind of built around the idea of the multiverse today. what's ultimate reality. It used to be that we would talk about ultimate reality back in like the, days of the ancient Greeks. We would talk about that by having people sail across the world, beyond, because that was whatever was beyond our horizon.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would, once we became medieval Christians, we would talk about in terms of heaven and hell. So, Dante's Inferno and Paradiso. It's like, okay, the bottom reaches of human evil, at the bottom of reality, and at the top of reality is all that's good. And then, as we started to become more secular, our scientific advancements got bigger, we started to talk about it in terms of outer space. And so you have Star Trek, you have Star Wars. And then now that we are, we've kind of gone to the farthest reaches, that we can, and we haven't seen anything that interesting, we're thinking about our own choices and our own choices living in a postmodern world where there are so many infinite seeming choices, but none of our choices really seem to make a dent in life. And so we're talking about the multiverse, where all our choices make all these differences in the world, but none of it seems to matter because it's all a multiverse, and any choice we make only affects our universe, doesn't affect all of reality. But it didn't reflect the way that way of talking about ultimate reality has never really reflected the way that I experience ultimate reality. And so I was like, again, if you're a storyteller, you want to be able to express the way your life and the way whatever you believe interacts in your imagination in these deep questions. And so I came up with this idea of a twist on the multiverse in order to explore some of these ideas and have fun with them, play in that sandbox of whatever ultimate reality is. And then once I realized I could do that in one location with 5 actors and set it at Christmas, then it just kind of went off from there.
It all comes back to Christmas.
Everything does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my first animated little special was Christmas related, because I was like, that was like 30 minutes almost. So I love Christmas so much, and it's a great thing to set your stories there. Like I always find it interesting how far it can go, and to set it in a fantasy like time travel thing is so fun. So yeah, hearing you talk about it is so fascinating, because how many times as creatives we come up with these stories, and the true limitation we have to actually express them is how much money we have in our pocket. And how sad that is. I have so many ideas that I just can't do with the budget I have, and then I just have to focus on one specific thing, and keep going with that project, even though it's takes a long time. Just keep doing it. So it's fascinating. Just taking that into consideration and actually pursuing a new idea and actually wanting to make a movie, and I guess cut back and have I think Nathan and I were talking about this, but sometimes with restrictions comes a bit of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of pours out, because essentially we find a way a way to still deliver what we want, the story we want to tell in a different way. And yeah, I think you did it's I felt really emotional watching the movie. There are topics in this that like the way the communication between the characters are, and the way the main character talks about his faith. There are things that
It's just
like
Joe
I'm not.
to a T. Like that's just what I thought
Yes.
when I watched the movie. It's like this dialogue is 100% Joseph Holmes. Like I feel like I've had this
Exactly.
exact sort of talk with Joe.
It's like exactly like the main character felt to be very much like listening to Joe in the podcast. Like it very much that. But at the same time, I was like, it is something. It's dialogue that you don't hear a lot in Christian movies. And that's what I really liked is the fact that, and one of the things, and I've talked to this about Nathan, that I love is when a character can be a Christian in a fantasy world or a sci-fi world without clashing with their, like, without the world itself clashing with their faith. Because that's what we experience in real life. Like that is like constantly we're bombarded by different ideas of how the world actually works, but we still believe that there is a God and that he's the creator of the universe. So why would it be different in these other worlds? And that's why like I always question like people who want to limit that, because I'm like, why, like, if there's religious people in whatever, like
In
in
your
the real
fantasy
world.
world, why not this religion?
Exactly. So it's like,
well, that's one of the things that was really interesting to me about this, because so again, Jim versus the Future, it's about a guy who is, he's a grad student and has a fiance and they've had a fight and he's not sure if they're going to stay together, and then he gets taken hostage and kidnapped by different people from different future timelines who all want to preserve their future timeline and try to force him to make the choice they'll preserve that. Hence, some of them want him to, break up with his fiance, others want him to stay together with her. And of course, the twist on the multiverse is the fact that instead of every choice you making, a new universe, the universe starts out with, every possible choice being made, and every choice you make, you destroy all the universes that make the opposite choice. And like you said, we could talk about the communication aspect a little bit, but it really is ultimately about somebody, learning to have a good conversation, a conversation where you can solve your problems with good communication skills. But one of the things a lot of times I feel like in science fiction, or these big fantasy stories, your character is kind of an everyman vessel, just kind of stand in for the audience. They don't kind of have their own personality that's pushing back on the world that they see or exist in with their own point of view. And so one of the things I had that was fun about this was, you have Jim who, obviously when he's being, held hostage and kidnapped, he kind of does what the home invader tells him to do.
Guns are very persuasive like that.
Yes. But one of the things that's, once he starts to kind of get more comfortable and he's wrestling with these ideas, he is wrestling with it with his own point of view. And as he pointed out, one of the things that's interesting, I remember somebody talked about, asked like a Catholic, what would you do if you found out aliens existed? And I said, well, if they wanted to become Catholics, we'd convert them. And I think that you're right. When Darwin brought in his theory of evolution, people didn't stop being Christians. They started either accommodating their Christianity to, the theory of evolution, or they rejected the theory of evolution, or some of them stopped being Christians. But there were different ways that this new kind of understanding of reality interacted with people's faith that they already had. So you have Jim who's getting this, interacting with this new worldview that's contrary to his own. He's going to interact with it from his own priors and either, accommodate his views to this new understanding of reality or reject that reality or not. And you're right. That's just a much more realistic way for people to interact with the world. They don't just, again, like every sci-fi character, they either reject the reality that they're given, or they eventually just kind of accept it full sail, whatever the person telling them what reality is tells them, because that's the story that, filmmakers want to tell is that
the red pill or the blue pill, Neo.
Exactly. And it's like, well, those aren't the only choices. That's not how people interact with their realities. And so that was something fun for me to do, is to have that kind of protagonist. And of course, as you said, Nathan, by the way, I just want to reiterate, Nathan worked on this movie with me. He was on set.
Yeah.
I could not have done it without him. He was amazing. And for a lot of different reasons, not just because he gave me some cover as I told people to turn down their music, but that was one of the cool things to talk about the story. Is I didn't want to do what other people's were doing. I wanted to have a person with his own views, own personality, wrestling with whatever was being presented to him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that is so much true to life itself, because I feel like when it comes to faith and truth, yes, obviously there is an objective truth, and it's not to say that this is like a sliding scale or a relative thing. It's just more like, I feel like the truth itself is so much bigger that we wind up assuming a lot of these things are inherently mutually exclusive. But I feel like what we learn in real life a lot is when we actually start to grapple with these things, we realize, oh, the truth is actually so big that things I think are mutually exclusive to it aren't quite as mutually exclusive as I think they are. Like, actually, and like you wind up growing to seeing yourself as like a vessel for the truth, I guess, to be very like Christianese about, you wind up growing more as a vessel that's able to take on a lot more because of that.
Yeah, and again, it's so fascinating to me because the normal thing to do in these kind of stories of sci-fi is, like you said, Joseph, just like it presents the idea to the person, and then the person kind of like rejects his previous beliefs or their previous beliefs and goes like, oh, I'll believe everything you're telling me of how the universe works now. And I don't know if that like makes sense to me, like as of how humans work. I mean, it can happen, like you said. Like some people will reject what they believe completely, but we haven't seen someone who rejects what the person is telling them about the universe and going like, no, I don't think that's how it works. So like I haven't seen that before, except for in like, and this is a thing that I keep telling Nathan about if he ever wants to actually listen to a narrative podcast. I'm always recommending Midnight Burger, because Midnight Burger is like the sci-fi multiverse hopping, like the audio narrative story, and is about this group of people that come together, and the universe, or this like entity that still hasn't been completely revealed, essentially moves this diner around between multiverses to help people with different problems. And there are two main characters that are full on like American like pastors, like that are like from the like I'm trying to think what year they're from, but I know they're from like the Midwest or something like that. They're very much, so it's like they are very much like, and the Lord has told you that you have to, like, kind of that. So, and they are a sci-fi element as well, because they are like entities trapped in a radio, basically, but they are Christian, and like the show does not shy away from that. And that's what I love, because the show is not written by Christians at all. Like, they are not Christian. Like, there is a lot of explicitives in the show. But I started listening because of the fact that it had these two Christian characters who act like Christians and never get like broken down by anyone else. Like they don't, like, every time they see a new thing, they just go like, well, let's like help those people and let's like show them the way of the Lord. And I love that. Like, and they don't even like push their religion on people either. Like, they believe it, and like they know that their friends don't believe it as much as they do, but they don't believe it at all. Like, some of them believe in God, but they're not Christian. So like they never push like their faith, and I love it. But they have prayers, like, and their friends sometimes goes like, oh, why don't you pray for this? And I'm like, oh, like that's so cool. Like, and that's such a like. It has made me cry multiple times because the characters have never stopped being Christians throughout the entire show, and it's on its 40 something episodes now, and it's beautiful. And they like in the newest season, the part two, in season 2 and 3, they introduced a new character that is a Roman Catholic, and he also experiences like a very supernatural like sci-fi event, and he essentially becomes immortal and stays like alive for a long time until modern days. So, but he doesn't stop believing in God, and he still continues believing his Catholic faith. And even like in the newest episode, like he tells the person he loves, he's like, I still believe that when I die, if I ever die, I'm going to go to heaven, and those who have died before me, I'll see them again. And he says something beautiful because he's like, I don't believe in what people say about eternity. I think they're wrong. I think that I have seen how beautiful it is to see my every family I've been with, every friend I've had grow old and live their entire lives. And that was so beautiful. I was like, and it's like, he goes like, and when I actually go on and I actually die, I know that I'll see them all again in heaven. And it's like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like, so it's like sci-fi and fantasy can include Christian characters without affecting how the world actually works within those narratives.
Well, that's the thing that's really cool, is because that's actually the world we live in today.
Yes.
Because, you know, one of the things, again, I've always found interesting in interacting with the world today is that literally everyone has a different interpretation of the world we live in.
Yes.
We have whatever, you know, facts we can all sort of observe and events agree on, but we all have incredibly different interpretations of it. And so what a lot of modern life is
like a story with the 3 blind men of the elephant.
Right,
Sorry.
exactly. And what that means is that there's no like one authority that we listen to that can say, this is what all of reality is like. There's multiple people who are going to come to us with different interpretations, and we have to either decide which one we believe or some combination of those things. And so again, it makes sense for someone who is a Christian to, you know, encounter this weird multiverse sci-fi Cthulhu event and have a different interpretation of it of somebody else because they have different priors. And like you said, that doesn't negate the fact, Nathan, particularly you said, negate the fact that there is one truth, and some of those truths are exclusive to others, and some of them are not. But it does mean that real people are going to interact with it in different ways. And if we're honest about the art we're making that's reflecting the lives we have, that's what we're going to portray. And certainly, again, I'm somebody who is a Christian. And so if I'm going to be honest in my art, I'm going to tell a story where, you know, again, and this was a fun thing because you have the different people who come to him and try to say, this is what reality is. And, you know, I'm going to portray a story that's like, okay, you know more about reality than I do in certain ways, but also you are in some ways unreliable about your interpretation of it. And I'm going to say, well, maybe there's a better interpretation than what you're saying. And again, not to repeat myself, that's just closer to how most of us today interact with the world. Because again,
like each of us have like puzzle pieces of reality, but we don't see the full picture.
Yeah. And again, it used to be that you lived in one small town and there was one doctor and one preacher, and they would be the people that would tell you this is what reality is like within my domain of expertise. And so you wouldn't have to struggle with understanding reality. You would just listen to the experts. But now we're forced to make those decisions because we have multiple experts competing for interpretations with us. And that's a scary thing, but also an empowering thing. But it's also, again, whatever you think of it, it's just the reality we live in.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I think when it comes to obviously we fluctuate on both sides where we think we're capable of understanding everything, and obviously we're not. But I think sometimes a lot of people also go to the other side where we think we're not that capable of understanding things at all. But I think as humans, we are capable of understanding more than we realize sometimes. And part of the reason we do that is through these conversations, through wrestling with things, through just talking things out, and through talking things out, through like clashing with different ideals of different people in big or small ways, we were able to sharpen each other, we were able to grow, and we were able to develop. And like to your point, talking about sci-fi movies or even Cthulhu type stuff, I feel like that kind of shows an inherent fear of the conversation with the unknown, where it's like whether this alien comes along or this Cthulhu eldritch being comes along, we're presented with this new idea, this new interpretation of reality, and we either completely reject it or we just go full ham into accepting it blindly and just completely putting aside what we had before. But in either case, it kind of like breaks us in some sense, is what we're worried about. Like say in the Cthulhu sense, where it's like, oh, I just experienced this eldritch being beyond my comprehension, and now my mind is completely broken, whether I accept it or not. But like trying to have a conversation with this thing has ruined me, so it's not even worth trying to acknowledge them or talk to them. I'd be better off just living in my own bubble. And that's just like inherently showing that fear of like trying to converse with people beyond your scope or beyond your understanding. But the reality is, through doing so, through talking with people outside of your perspective on life or outside of where you live or yada yada, that actually helps us grow so much more, and that strengthens us to be able to handle so much more of what reality actually is.
That's actually fascinating. I never thought about the Cthulhu archetype as a representative of our fear of having our paradigm shifted. It's like, oh, okay, if I don't, this is going to break me. If I experience something that breaks me, this is going to break me. It's going to destroy me. When over time we've discovered that that's not the case. We've had to have that happen as a culture so many times that it's not broken us. In fact, again, we're experiencing kind of cultural shifts right now where people are like, you know what? I'm going to reject some of these new paradigms. I'm going to go back to some older ways of thinking. I'm going to do, again, it's not broken us. We actually are stronger and able to adapt to these new paradigms or even reject them, some of them, than we thought we were. And that's a kind of a cool thing to realize.
Now, obviously, we can't do it at once, and it's a time and patience thing, but it's something we definitely can do. It's like trying to work out a muscle. Like you're not going to be able to lift the heaviest thing as soon as you get to a gym. You have to work your way up to it.
Yeah, the whole point of every Cthulhu story, like and all the stories that guy wrote, was based on the fear of finding out something that you didn't know. A lot of the characters that he had in those stories were also like religious, but like this new experience that they had kind of like breaks their whole reality and go like, oh well, I guess these are the actual gods that exist, not the one I believed in. So like there's a lot of that in those books. So it's like this everything that he writes is based on that fear of breaking reality, of also fearing certain people as well. And that's where it gets iffy, right? But it's like but it's essentially that. Like those entire series is about fear. But what I like about what you wrote and what you made with this movie is that it's about conversation, and that's a very popular thing right now. Of like if you like, at least it's something that we are starting to get into because we want to like better ourselves as a society and actually communicate better. And it's something awesome that you are tapping into, which like that I've seen like going around like and things like Shrink right now, like things like Steven Universe as well, like as a cartoon idea, like as a cartoon example.
People talking about mental health more.
People talking about mental health more in different shows, movies, and stuff like that. There's this idea now of trying to through film, through art, trying to express real communication, trying to show people what communication can look like. And I literally would show this movie to someone, like to explain like how like communication could look like, and I was really happy with it. I cried a little at the end when they actually communicate the way they do, because it not only felt like a real thing that I've experienced whenever two people are mature enough to have a conversation, uh, but it also can show an even more mature way of handling it, because like it was not perfect, but it was essentially like the best ideal version of how a communication between your partner, or pretty much I think it can be put in anyone, like even a friendship, can actually like work. And like
Thank you.
as
I
someone,
appreciate that. No,
yeah.
I mean, sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was just gonna say, as someone who like has to direct voice actors, and also like does D&D, and I have to do like GMing and stuff like that, communication is a big part of that all the time. And if someone gets hurt, like we try to communicate and see where that hurt came from. If I get hurt, like I try to see, hey, like this is what's happening, and this is what I thought you meant. And then the other person can be like, no, that's not what I meant. And I feel like it's beautiful. Like, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's good just to have more good positive examples of communication, because like we were just saying, either there's this inherent fear of communication with the unknown, like with aliens or Cthulhu, or just from like the generic writing perspective, I feel like there's just kind of the assumption of, oh well, people communicate, then we have no plots, and we can't have that. We need to write so people don't communicate, so we don't just include that at all, just for the sake of having a plot. But with like your movie, Joe, it's having a plot that also shows good examples of good communication, showing that reality can still be interesting while also having good communication as we try to put reality together.
Yes, Nathan. Yes.
No, it's true. It's one of those things where, and I was kind of nervous about the conversation at the end, because again, all of us are Christians, and we come from the Christian world where we have seen a lot of examples of, faith-based films trying to say, okay, let me show you the ideal version of what reality is like, so that you have a picture of it, so that you can follow this example. And what has ended up often happening, not always, but often in our experience, which we're reacting to as millennials, is this is not actually reflective of reality. It's telling us, showing a reality we wish existed, rather than a reality we existed.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started on the God's Not Dead franchise, and how the third movie actually did well, and then they went back on it in the next one because nobody liked the third one because it was not Christian enough. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, the third one has the best communication in the entire, and how like Christians should act and how Christians should be. Oh my gosh. Like it's so like that's such a huge example of how like sometimes, I'm sorry, like to be a bit offensive, but it's like a bit delusional people are with their scripts of like Christian scripts, right? It's like it's a bit delusional to think that like the way those stories are made, that's how Christianity should be and how that's how the world should work. And like, no.
Yeah. So that's so definitely, like when I was writing this conversation, I was definitely worried I didn't want to present like a way reality should be, but I let myself go with it because I wasn't writing what reality should be. I was showing what I've actually experienced in healthy versions of these conversations. These are actual conversations I have had, and what I'm sharing with people is my experience of when I've had experiences where life was redeemed. What did it look like? When relationships were redeemed, when I was able to get past my own flaws and bridge the gap with the other person. Not the way I wish it could be, but the way I've actually experienced it being. What did that look like? And I think you make an excellent point about there's a lot of more stories right now about communication being the goal. And there's a lot of reasons, I think, for that. One of them being that, like I said, how we used to be like the bridge to cross was, was sailed across the seas, and then it became heaven and hell, and then it became, space. But right now, because community is breaking apart, the bridge we have to divide is just communication with each other.
Yeah.
That's the gap we're trying to bring. It's like I live in a building where most of the people, I don't know their names.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of us feel the gap between us and other people, and we want and need to bridge that gap. And so, one of the things I wanted to do in the ending conversation is to treat that conversation like a fight scene, is how I describe it. It's like, this is the moment where, instead of, Spider-Man versus Green Goblin, it's, can we battle our own demons in order to bridge the gap between us and redeem all of reality through the simple act of a conversation? Because again, as a Christian, I talk a lot about the difference between Christian worldview and Christian imagination. And Christian worldview is whatever you believe about reality. Jesus is God. He died for our sins. There's heaven and hell and stuff like that. But Christian imagination, but just imagination in general, is how you picture the world in your head before you think about it. And it's like, before you can say, I believe Jesus is God, you have to have an image in your head of what Jesus is and what God is before you can say that's true or false. And I think for me, as a Christian, based on what I believe, based on just how I imagine the world, I imagine the world in such a way, as C.S. Lewis described, you've never met a mere mortal or an ordinary person. What Christianity does is it says all the ordinary, simple moments of your life that you go through, those are all infinitely important. And so the just going across the room to have a conversation with someone you care about that allows you to repair love is an act of redeeming the world that Jesus called us to do. If the arc of history, if the point of all reality and the story we live in is relationships are broken and the world is broken and we need to work to repair it, then every time that you have a relationship with someone and you say, hey, there's this chasm between us that essentially is hell, because that's what, Christianity talks about. Like, hell is separation from God. It's separation from reality. It's separation from love. It's separation from community, whatever. That's how, whatever hell exists between us, I'm going to close that gap, or at least fight to close that gap. Because Paul says, as far as it depends on you, live in peace with other people. You're not going to close every gap, but in the same way that, the Avengers defeating Loki is a way of restoring the good that's in the world, or Benoit Blanc solves a murder case and restores it. Every time that you cross that chasm and say, let's repair potentially what we have, you are a part of saving the multiverse. And that's what I wanted to, in a small way, convey with that scene, but do it from a sense of like, oh, I've actually experienced the small ways of doing that in the past. And so, like you said, Nathan, there is this fear that if we're going to show positive things, that it's going to be preachy or dishonest. And Vince Gilligan, who did Breaking Bad, talked about that. It's like there's this trend of doing anti-heroes because you may be embarrassed by doing more good characters. But the problem with that is if you're doing all anti-heroes, that nobody grows up with an imagination of what it could even look like.
They had no example set for this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good, Joe. And I feel like I'm suddenly reminded of that famous pithy line. I forget what it's from exactly. You might remember, Joe, of like, hell is other people. But in reality, it's kind of the other way around. Hell is that chasm where you're not able to connect with other people or with God. And it also, this reminds me of something I learned from you talking about that like shifted my perspective on terms of rom-coms, romantic comedies, because growing up, even now, like I'm still not inherently drawn to them, or like if I'm drawn to them, I'm drawn more to the comedy side as opposed to the romance side. But I remember something you said about them that I thought was really interesting that changed my perspective, where it's like one of the things that you get the most satisfaction out of rom-com is when both main characters learn to get over themselves, and through getting over themselves, that's how they're able to actually connect and like redeem themselves in that sense and really find like close that chasm and be able to become so much more than either of them could become alone, because they learn how to get over themselves and actually communicate what's on their hearts to each other. And it's also kind of like that other movie that you showed me that I thought was good. The Fighter, I think it was, where like it's like the guy trying to like learn how to communicate with both his estranged family and his new girlfriend, and trying to like get them to like reconcile in a sense. But like he's just like but the biggest fight for him, even though it's all about him being like a professional fighter, and that's important too, the biggest fight for him is just learning how to speak up for himself and be like, hey, I love you guys even though X, Y, and Z, and I love you even though X, Y, and Z. I want to make this all work, and the only way I can figure out how to make this all work is to actually like learn to assert myself, learn to communicate myself, and learn how to understand you guys, and blah blah blah. But like again, like it's this fight to like communicate, not so much of like trying to like get your way over the other person, but more learning how to get over yourself to be like, oh no, if I'm actually going to participate in reality, I need to share what I have just as they're sharing what they have, and we need to learn how to make these puzzle pieces fit together. But yeah, it's all, I get all of that from you, and it's very satisfying to see it all come together in this movie.
I'm glad to see that the struggles and my trauma of life can benefit other people.
Because I'm right there with you, buddy.
Yeah, no, I think it's because, and the way I could relate to that conversation is because I've been able to, like, ever since, and it's sad because at the same time, it's like, it's still like, I don't think I've experienced good, like, legitimately good communication outside of online spaces. Like, and that's sad. I find it a bit sad that that's the case. But my experience with good, legitimate communication has been online, and has been with people like in a place where like more you could misinterpret more things, because sometimes you're not even seeing people's faces. It's fascinating how a lot of people are willing to have communications with each other, and that's why I don't think there's like these big statistics right now of like, oh, people are spending the majority of their lives in the internet. I'm like, well, yeah, because I mean, they are finding communities in the internet. They're not just like alone in the internet. They are finding these communities in the internet when they're not finding them outside of it. And like, I've learned legitimately to communicate with people online, basically, and I can still apply those skills that I've learned in the real world. And I have done it in like at my job, for example. Like, I had a couple of issues at my job when I was in the US, and I solved it through communicating with the person I had that problem with. And you know what? We became like a bit like pals. Like, it seemed like a lot of the misunderstandings were happening because the company was basically telling us things that were not true about each other. The way the communication was going between HR and them was not very good. Like, it was like second line communication, so we were not getting the full picture right. So like, once I was like, okay, screw it, I'm just gonna talk to them directly, then like, things were solved. And similarly, I've experienced that in many other ways. Like, and like you were saying, Joseph, it feels like something. Like, it feels like a fight. It feels like every time you are going to communicate like with someone, and like, I feel this nervousness and this like I know there's gonna be like this confrontation, and
like, you have the plan in your head. You already planned out how this conversation is going to go. You're so confident. You've been replaying it in your head. Then, boom, you get punched in the nose, and suddenly your plan goes out the window because that person says something or does something that you weren't accounting on, because life is so much bigger than what we think it in our head is.
Exactly. And like, you have to always like think this could go wrong. This communication could definitely like not solve our problems, but even create a bigger like space of hell, basically, like between us. And that is the scary part, and that's built so well in this movie of like, when we have this communication, it can, like, the relationship can either end or it can continue and be fruitful. And I think that that is such a beautiful thing to present. And like, even if you are just going through experience, I think the way you wrote it, it's very much like very beautiful, and it was like truly beautiful. And what you were saying about communication just now, about like how it is basically, I ever since I started like following my own faith journey, not just what my parents taught me, but like I'm saying, like, once like I turned 15 and I started like actually having my own faith journey, because I converted when I was 8. So up to that point, my knowledge was just what my parents had taught me, and what I've learned in the church, right? But once I started, when I turned 15, like, I started having my own experiences, and even before that, right? I think one of the things that I pushed upon growing up was the fact that I was always told by the church, or I was always told by my parents and the people around me, that I couldn't make friends with people outside of the church. And I had a lot of friends outside of it. I made a lot of friends, and I had this, like, I think that starting from there, like, I had this idea of like, why can't I make friends with these people? I've had the most meaningful connections with these people, not and I did have my connections within the church, right, as well, like, but I also had meaningful connections with other people that were not part of the church, that were outside of it, and they didn't influence me to change, but we communicated with each other basically, and stood our own ground, and they would be open and receptive to me talking about my faith. And I think that that's the thing, like, and I never felt like I wasn't there to convert them. And it's something that I've learned in my walk as a Christian, from 15 to now 26 and soon 27 next year, that I like, Jesus calls us to make disciples, not to convert people. And like, there's this huge push from sometimes, like, erroneously, from a lot of Christians and a lot of pastors and a lot of churches to and I'm speaking from a place where I still go to church. I'm a person that, and I believe in going to church, and I believe that community needs to be like forged, and it needs to be something that you keep. I'm coming from that space. I'm not coming from someone who's criticizing the church because I hate it or anything like that. I criticize the church because I love it. I criticize it because I want it to be better. So that's why I do it, just in case, because I know that I've criticized the church a lot sometimes, but it's because I come from a place where I love it, and I want it to be better. So, but what I see a lot of the time is this idea that feels disingenuous to me, to make friendships, to make connections, just to convert someone. And I feel like that is
it's like
a problem.
Working to get a job.
Exactly. So like it feels like a problem to me. And what I have learned, and the way I have like created like this understanding of is having genuine, loving conversations with people, no matter what happens. And my goal is never to convert someone. My goal is to make relationships, make friendships, make the people around me and the world around me. I want to be the image of Christ in the space. It's not about converting anyone. It's not about switching anyone's mind from what they believe. and it's more about presenting myself as the example of Christianity, presenting myself and being the most I can be to a Christ figure in the space. And I feel people are more receptive to that. And I feel like people will get curious and people will talk to you about it. And I've had so many experiences of wounded people that have been wounded by other Christians, have been wounded by the church, to come to me and be like, Raymond, you're so different from other Christians that I've met. Like you are legitimately, like, even when you say you still believe in the things that you believe in, and you hold these truths about your faith, but I never feel judged by you. And I feel like that is like there's this communication that we need to have with the world, because if we are just communicating this, like you said, it's like if we are communicating in a way where people feel like we can't be approached, then we are creating hell between us. We are sending people to that hell. We are creating that hell for other people without intention, right? They're not intending to do that, but that's what's happening. And in a time where, like you said, that communication is needed, that communication has been the thing that it has been lost, and it's like the goal for people to actually come as a community again. I feel like it's important. The communication is important, and it's something that as Christians, the Christianity needs to be aware of, and we need to get better at it. Like we truly do.
That's the biggest way we can, like we're saying, that's the biggest way we can fight. And I feel like it really says a lot, and we reference this all the time as Christians, but I feel like it really says a lot that Jacob wrestled with God, where I feel like at the end of the day, when it comes to good and loving and honest communication, we think it's like all sweet and sunshine and rainbows and blah blah blah, and there is like a sweetness and gentleness to it, but at the same time it could also be very messy. It could be like a bare knuckle brawl or wrestling or grappling, and it could just be very dark, very messy, just lots of like in the mud, in the weeds, in the trenches of like trying to figure out how to best communicate yourself with this other person and about how to best understand them, and just show the love of God through that, or even just trying to communicate with God directly and wrestle with him and process what he's like and accept that and embrace that. And that can just be a very, at the end of the day, in reality, it's just a very messy process. Again, it's kind of like the embodiment of dark schmaltz, where like we have the schmaltz, we have the love, we have the tenderness, we have the kindness and connection, but the darkness is that reality is a very messy thing. And so like, it doesn't taint the other things, but it does show that in order to get to the other things, we need to like take the good with the bad. We need to take this messiness and wade through it and fight our way through it to try to close that gap between us in order to get to the smalt, in order to get to the goodness and show the people the goodness is real, the goodness is here. We just have to take the time to communicate and process these things, because if we don't, then the gap between us and the gap between us and God is only going to get wider and wider. And the great part is, God is right there with us. He's going through the mud with us. He's going through the weed with us, and he's meeting us where we are. And he's not afraid of like whatever we have to do in order to process each other or process him. I'm like, I forget the name of the movie all of a sudden, but Joe, you might remember it. But like, there's this one scene in the movie I remember really liking. It's about a pastor, basically. I forget the full premise of it, but there's a scene I like where a pastor is just kind of like praying with God, like in his room, in his house, like upstairs. And he's literally just like yelling out loud. He's like getting angry at God. He's like probably even cursing too, but like he's just like yelling at God, be like, God, how can you let this cop in? Or like, why do I have to deal with this? Blah, blah, blah. And then like he's so loud that like neighbors in his neighborhood are able to like hear him. And so they call his house, and his mom like picks up and it's like, hey, is everything going on or going all right over there? Like we're hearing like a lot of yelling, a lot of cursing, a lot of expletives, blah, blah, blah. Is everything all right? And the mom's like, oh yeah, that's just Davy or whatever. He's praying to God. Like that's his prayer.
That might be the apostle. That might be the apostle.
That was it. So like that's him fighting. That's him processing. That's him wrestling. And again, that's very much what reality is like. If like things aren't going to be sunshine and rainbows, but we stick to it anyway. We hold on. We hold on to God just so we can finally get that blessing, just so we can finally see that goodness, just so things finally make sense. And through that, he blesses us.
Well, I think that this is really interesting because this also goes to themes that I was kind of wrestling with in Jim vs. the Future, which is that one of the reasons that we are afraid oftentimes to bridge the gap with other people is we are afraid that the only way that we're allowed to do that is to leave a part of ourselves behind. You know, and you know, one of the things that's interesting is that there is, again, in the story, again, this is the dichotomy that Jim is placed with, is that either you're going to have to stand up for yourself in your relationship and you're going to lose the relationship, or you're going to keep the relationship by being a doormat, essentially. And there's interesting statistics by sociologist George Yancey, who's a Black Christian. And one of the things he notes is that sort of evangelical Christians tend to build relationships based around religion. And so it's like they're more likely to have friends who share the same religion. Whereas mainline Christians and secular kind of people tend to build relationships based on shared politics. And one of the things that a lot of Christians are wrestling with often at times I find is that they say, I can only be friends with people who are not Christians if I don't ever step on their toes, like regarding politics. Like I can say that I'm a Christian and I believe X or believe Y, but if I bring maybe a different political point of view or a different cultural view, then they're going to cut off a relationship with me. And so you say like, okay, I can't. And again, I see this a lot of times. I joke. There's an old, I think it was a book called The Protestant Work Ethic or something like that, where they said that Calvinists believed that they could demonstrate that they were saved based on how hard a worker they were. Again, like, how do I show other people I'm part of the elect? Is because, or how do I show myself I'm part of the elect? It's how hard a worker I am. And I found that a lot of times for millennial Christians, the joke I did is that we determine how good a Christian we are by whether or not non-Christians like us. And so,
yeah.
And so, there is this. So a lot of times Christians are afraid to develop relationships with non-Christians because they think the only way to do that is to compromise my beliefs. And sometimes that's not going to be whether or not, God is real or something like that. Sometimes it's going to be a cultural issue, whether it's abortion or whether it's something else. I'm going to have to not bring a certain part of myself to the table in this relationship. And I think one of the things I think is important is to be brave enough to be able to not make necessarily your friendship conditional on a person agreeing with you on everything. But then also to be brave enough to bring your whole self to the table and say, this is a part of who I am. Are you willing to accept that about me? And are you willing to have this kind of dialogue back and forth about this with me? And that requires you to be brave enough to risk losing the relationship to bring your whole self to the table. And I've struggled with this. Again, my dad was a pastor. He would always say, I never preach a sermon that I don't need to hear. And so I have dealt with this fear of, if I bring my whole self to the table, will I be rejected? And will I think, and how do I do that? How do I bridge that gap in that way? So that, because that's another way of creating hell between us, is to be in a relationship with somebody, but not bring your whole self there so that they see all of you. And so trying to wrestle with that and trying to put that in a film, what I always tell people with film specifically, again, like if you're preaching a sermon or if you're giving a lecture, it's a slightly different thing. You could be a bit more like, here's what I believe and here's why you should believe it too. There's a bit more of that because it's a different genre. But when you're doing art, when you're making movies, what I often try to give people the images of is when you're sitting down in a relationship with your mom and she's telling you why you should get married, versus you're sitting down with your friend who's just gotten married and they're talking about all of the reasons that they enjoy being married. It's like, one is a much more pleasant conversation. Now, both of them might actually make you feel a desire to get married, although more likely it's going to be the one who's just describing what is beautiful about it.
Because it's more personal. It's more descriptive rather than prescriptive.
Yeah, it's that you're not resenting the fact that somebody is telling you what to do, and you're not also feeling like there's probably an inherent dishonesty. Like, okay, you're only bringing the parts of it that you think are going to persuade me. Instead, you're bringing the whole self of yourself to say, this is my experience. This is why it gives me joy. And I want to share that with you. And so again, it's a little different, when you're preaching a sermon or you're writing an essay. And again, I write culture criticism as well. And so I do the kind of the arguments thing in there. But I really tried to stretch myself with this movie because this is the kind of movies I like to do, where it's characters who are arguing with each other, so there is that kind of didactic back and forth. But really, it's presenting, this is what I've experienced reality being like, and presenting it to you to say, what are you going to do with this? Now that you know that there's somebody out in the universe who's experienced reality this way, are you going to say, yeah, that seems like an expression of reality that resonates with me, or it's something, a version of reality I think is beautiful, I'd like to be a part of, or is it going to be something that I'm going to some degree, maybe reject a lot of because it doesn't resonate with me or it doesn't seem beautiful to me? That's, I think, the way to put art out into the world in a way that, and it may be the best way to bring relationships out in the world, is this is who I am. Do you find that something that resonates with you? Do you find that compelling? And if you do, then we can build a relationship. But again, this is all stuff that I'm still wrestling with, and I'm trying to present the answers that I've come up with the best I can and leave the rest up to you.
Yeah, it's a fascinating balance, and we're still all trying to find that balance in our own ways. Because, like, on one hand, yes, any healthy relationship is going to involve compromise to some extent, some way, somehow. But at the same time, there's just some things that you can't compromise on, and one of those things is your real self. Because if you're not bringing your real self into your relationship, if you're compromising your real self, then they're not really having a relationship with you. They're just having the relationship with this fake self that you made up in order to be accepted. And like what you're getting at, Joe, is one of the great things about being able to bring your real self in a space, in a context, in a role that really works for you, is that just you, by inherently the virtue of doing that, you're able to close so many gaps just by bringing your real self into those correct spots and spaces. Where it's like, it's similar to how, say, you go on a tour to some art museum or to some topic that you don't really know much about, and the tour guide you have there that's leading you is super passionate about art or whatever topic they're talking about, and like you can see the joy emanating from them just the more they talk about, and they're able to say and talk about in so many interesting different ways, so many cool anecdotes, so many cool stories, and that just by the virtue of them being their full self, their full passionate self, talking about this artistic thing they love, you just feel more of you feel drawn to it now, where it's like, oh, I suddenly like art now because I'd spent so much time with this person that is so real, so honest, so genuine with me about their passion, that now I understand why someone would be passionate about this topic, and I never would have thought about that before. So like now I have this full perspective because this person was so honest about themselves and brought their full selves to me, that I see the world in a much more brighter, bigger way now, just because they were their real selves.
It's so interesting because I am very much, I like to think of myself as someone who is very honest with their thoughts most of the time with the people that I actually want to form relationships with. And like, there is like this, like when you're at work and when you're like, when I'm at church, when I'm at these places, I know that I need to present my way in a certain way because I could get fired if I don't. And in church, like I could lose opportunities if I don't, because like there's like this level of like trust that people put upon you if you have like this air to you, basically. Like you have to put on this like sense of formality basically in certain spaces. And that's just how it works as well in real life. Like there are spaces that you have to be formal, that you can't just like be your crazy self around. Like I can't go to a bank and just start going like, woohoo, yeah! Like to like every time like
context is always important. You gotta know your audience.
Exactly.
You gotta know who you're working with.
I just imagine that the guard just tackles you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that context, right? But whenever I am like legitimately trying to form a relationship with or like a conversation, I'm trying to have it, right? I really want to be entirely myself and entirely honest. And I find it always as a test of if that friendship is good or not. Because if I'm not able to, if if I'm with a person who legitimately will leave me if I believe a certain thing, then that is not a person I want to be with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not a person I want to hang out with, because then it to me, like, what I've learned is, and it's so surprising when I say this to people, but like, I still consider myself very conservative when it comes to like my religion, and not as much in politics, like, because I've never been into politics that much. I'm more of a like neutral party when it comes to that. But when it comes to my religion, I am very conservative with it. I still like. I don't like to. I'm very much someone who likes to interpret the Bible in a historical, literal sense. So everything it says, that's what it is. That's how it's supposed to be, and all this stuff. And I believe it fully, right? And I always question more like people who like want to like interpret it a different way, because I'm like, okay, then well, why do you believe in this then? And I try to find out the reason, like, why do you believe in this if you need to justify it somewhere else. So, but what I've learned is that coming into a conversation means breaching the gap between two different ideals, between two different ideas, between like two different worlds coming together. Like, minds are unique. Like, even if they are similar, they are unique, and every mind is its own world. Every person thinks their own way, and they are raised by different people who thought a different way, and they have created this network, these neurons that travel between each other, and these paths, they're all different. That's why I believe neurodiversity is just something that is like, there's no high or low. It's just everyone has a different type of brain, everyone has a different way of thinking, but we are similar, as in we are all human. And we can all reason, and we can all get to be educated, and we can all get to thinking with reason. Even those who think that some people are like, there are some limitations, right? But I do think that whenever we are able to find a way for someone, no matter how their brain works or what their limitations are, to communicate, that's when things change. When you find like how even through technology, even through anything, right? When a person, for example, if someone is like completely catatonic, like, what's going to change that person's lives is able to communicate what they're thinking. It's able to communicate their thoughts. And like, the technology has been really helpful for people who cannot communicate, and I am thankful to God that that's the case, that people are creating these like, I've recently I saw this new prototype for something that's going to revolutionize a lot of lives, and it's like this device, this AI device that you put like on your, like, over here, and it's like sending, essentially reading the signals from your brain and communicating to someone else's phone, and from that, like, you get what the person is kind of thinking, or what they're formulating in their mind. So that's something really cool. Like, the prototype was made, and it's like semi-functional basically. At some point in our future, we'll be able to have that, and everyone who can't legitimately talk or communicate, and I'm really happy that that's going to be the case, they can actually communicate their thoughts, and they can, because without communication, we cannot help someone. Even babies communicate, and that's the fascinating thing to me, is that like a lot of like thoughts in the past were like, babies can't tell us anything about, like, that's why they cry, like, but yeah, like the crying. And but what I've learned recently is that you can teach your baby sign like a
I've learned that recently as well.
And you can actually teach them, hey, whenever you're hungry, do this, or like, and they actually are able to comprehend that and do it. Like, and that's so like blows my mind, because it shows you, hey, communication is the most important key. Find the way to communicate. Find the way to breach the gap. Like even with animals, like we didn't know you could communicate with animals. Now we have like this extensive like knowledge of how to communicate with them in a way, right? Of course we can't like talk literally to them, but like we like understand certain things and we can accommodate to those things, right? Like we like this the cues like they're important. And it's just so fascinating. Communication is
Why
incredible.
don't you talk to each other?
Yes!
Just give it a try.
Because again, like by doing so, we're able to make our life, our reality, our imagination so much bigger than it was before. Because again, this is us talking about how we think the truth is just one thing, or we think certain things are just, or we think so many things are just inherently mutually exclusive. But then when we actually take the time to process it, we're like, oh, wait, this is actually more of a reality than I thought it was. This is more possible than I initially thought. These things aren't inherently mutually exclusive. So like you go around thinking, oh yeah, there's no way babies communicate. There's not even any point in trying. Like the assumption is like babies can't communicate, and we'll go do, and we'll just live our lives with that assumption. Then someone comes along and is like, wait, are we sure about that? Have we actually tried? Let's test this out. Let's experiment. Oh, wait a minute. Babies actually can communicate. We just need to teach them sign language and other stuff. Oh, wow. This opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. Like, it just feels like you're seeing the world in a whole new color now. Like, your world has literally gotten bigger. Like, your imagination has expanded. There are more possibilities. And that all came from just trying to learn how to communicate or trying to, like, process something that people had not tried to process before because they just go around assuming certain things and realize and assume it's not worth trying to process these things. But when you take the time to actually step in and communicate and process, you wind up there's so much more of a benefit to it.
Yeah, you make it when you assume you make an ass of you and Ming, and that's
Ming
not good.
does not appreciate that.
Ming doesn't appreciate it. No, but okay. So, look, the fascinating thing to me is that I like. It's so cool that we kind of like you said, most people create these assumptions when they communicate with someone, and it's like and this is how I really think stereotypes and like about man, about gender, about like a culture have been made, because
Black people.
because people like to simplify their worldview with specifically who they have interacted with. Mm-hmm. And that's such a like strange, like it is what humans do. They want to simplify things, right? When things are more complex than what they make them out to be.
And that's inherently bad. The problem is when we do it too much.
Well, so this is what we talk about all the time, Nathan, the map.
Yes.
Which is that, all of reality is a forest. Mm-hmm. And in order to navigate the forest, you need a map. Particularly, again, you first have to start out just exploring the forest. Mm-hmm. And from the forest, you create a map, because the map helps you find your way a second time. Mm-hmm. And it also helps you to be able to help other people to navigate the forest so they don't get lost. Mm-hmm. And so then oftentimes we come into reality with maps other people have drawn for us that help us to navigate the forest. Mm-hmm. The problem is sometimes the forest changes for a variety of reasons, or sometimes you explore a different part of the forest nobody has actually explored before, or for a variety of reasons, the map doesn't hold up as well as it should. And so from there, you have a couple of choices. You can either keep operating as if the map is perfect, and then you don't find your way. You actually just don't actually find your way. Or you have to play around with the map and maybe find the places where it doesn't actually work and explore it in a new way. And that's scary because you don't know what you're actually going to find if you go beyond what the map is written for you. So there's a lot of people who just say, I'm just going to stick to the map, even though it's not actually helping me get where I want to go, because the alternative is scary. Mm-hmm. And then there are people who abandon the map entirely, and then they fall off a cliff. It takes a certain degree of being able to hold that intention of recognizing that the map is useful, but it's not the forest. Mm-hmm. And Christians will often talk about this, about look, God is not theology. Theology tells us things about God so that we can so that we can actually have a relationship with him, because you can't have a relationship without knowing things about him.
Mm-hmm.
But theology is not actually having a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes, again, this is, a lot of the arguments Jesus had with the Pharisees was either it's like, hey, you've built up a lot of rules that are on top of what God actually said to you so that it made you feel safer in navigating the forest. But this is actually not helpful for you anymore because it's actually getting in the way of you actually navigating the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And in other cases, like, hey, also the Messiah has come, so some of this has changed. Sometimes the degree of the forest has changed a little bit. And so that's the struggle all of us actually.
Yeah, because I can tell you about my friend Joe as much as I want, but that's not a replacement for actually getting to know and personally meeting Joe. It's like the whole verse of taste and see that the Lord is good. It's inviting you to actually come and do it yourself. You can't taste something for someone else. They actually have to come and experience God for themselves. And when it comes to dealing with life, you need to learn to engage yourself as well. Like, again, you have the guidance, you have the map, and that's very helpful, but it's still no replacement for you actually taking the effort to engage yourself. Because if you don't engage, you're not actually living life.
The other thing is I realized that I did kind of two versions of ways it can go wrong. Another way it can go wrong, and this is the way it's more common today, is that people do try to have the map and have their experience and hold them in tension, but they do it just by themselves without the context of doing it with other people, but also tradition. And so then so it ends up being just like, well, I'm just going to rewrite the map according to my own individual experience, what works for me, even though, again, our own individual experience does not encompass enough of reality to actually help us.
Because what I experience with Joe might be different from what another person might experience with Joe. And then if we all talk together about, we have such a fuller understanding of each other and our relationships, either individually or collectively. So we can't do this in a vacuum.
Go to church, and also I don't necessarily want to talk to you. So, like, but God does want to talk to you, so go to church.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It comes from that, like, just that map, right? Like, that's such a good way to put it. Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that with that, we can move on to like a bit of a lore section here. So I'm fascinated. So to talk about this, I'm gonna say spoilers. If you like haven't watched the movie, you can stop here. But I just want to talk about it because it's like I find it cool.
It's for millennials and Gen Z. We need the lore. We need
lore. Yeah, but okay. So from what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? The idea that they are presenting is that like you said, multiverse works with multiple like realities, and that every time somebody chooses something, like the world is dying. Instead of creating a new one, it's actually dying because all possibilities were created from the beginning. Is what you were saying, like at least what the other characters are saying, basically how the multiverse works, right? The what they're presenting us the multiverse works like, how it works. Sorry. So, like, are they right? Like, is that how it works, or are they interpreting it? Because at the end we learn that one of the conversations that the main character has with his daughter is the fact that like if you like, I don't recall perfectly, but it was like if that was the case, then you would be able to get off the ropes.
What I present is the idea that that if there's a couple possibilities, either these are real futures or they are possible futures.
Yeah.
And Jim is suggesting that if they are only possible futures, not real futures, that each choice doesn't actually kill any person who's really alive. It kills potential versions of them. And of course she kind of rejects that because her experience of herself is that she's really alive, not that she's just a potential version of herself. So
a universe echo.
But it posits the fact that, they pause the fact that, well, okay, there would be a way to test this. That if you, and she presents this to you, if you could actually, if we were all the potential futures, then his actions would have some control over the reality of each individual multiverse, not just whether or not certain multiverses live or die. And then one of the things that happens in the story, again, a spoiler alert, is that his actions, even in just his own emotions, do affect to some degree the reality that these individual multiverses actually exist. So, yeah, this is, again, where I talk about, as an artist, I posit things I imagine, not things that are in a systemic theological worldview.
Of course. Of course.
Which is, and where in the same way that, so there's a theological construct called Molinism, which I referenced in the movie, for people who are like, I see where he's going with it.
Which is not about moles, for anyone who doesn't know.
No. It's named after a person who was a mole. It's frightening enough. No, but he is that God creates, reality, but then he creates he has foreknowledge of all the potential outcomes.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, and then but people are free to choose between those potential outcomes. And correct, God also can, stack the deck, so to speak, through his action.
So basically, Gardner's future vision is Steven Universe. Got it.
I didn't know there was an actual term for that, because that's what I believe. Hold on.
It's called Molinism. Yeah, actually.
Molinism.
So, like, again, if you want, you can watch the debate between, I think it's James White and William Lane Craig, where they debate Calvinism versus Molinism. It's really fascinating. But regardless, those futures, in some extent, exist already in the mind of God because they exist as counterfactuals, but they haven't been actualized in reality yet. And so
the future is not set in stone, damn it.
So Jim kind of has the opportunity to interact with people who are a midpoint between real people and simply potential people, because they can interact with him in the same way dreams can interact with us and desires can interact with us, and our own imagination of what we want the future to look like, or we can imagine the future to look like, can interact with us. These characters are able to interact with him and present him with possibilities for his future that he can accept or reject. But he isn't forced to, kill any real people. Instead, the choices he makes affects the lives that they live in a real way. Now, again, I'm sort of kind of treating this as the first encounter with a potential reality, a way of looking at the world. The same way that Jesus presented himself as, look, we have one God, and I have a relationship with the Father, but I'm also the Son, but I'm also God, but we're separate, but there's still just one God. And he kind of presented with all of these things on the table. And then it took maybe 500 years for us to, or I don't know, whatever years for the church to say, okay, so we're going to describe this as one God and three persons. That's how we're going to kind of systematize this. I'm presenting this multiverse idea as something that's not been systematized yet. And so I can even say I haven't systematized all how it works, but Jim is interacting with it and saying okay, well, it's not quite what you're saying, and I can test that in a certain way. So it's more like this and less like this. But I know enough about how it works that I can make choices about where I'm going to go going forward. So I don't have all of the lore answers of, well, is it a potential future, a possible future, or is it real? It's some midpoint between that I don't quite understand totally, and Jim doesn't quite understand, but he understands enough to be able to make the choices he thinks he needs to make.
What I like about that is it feels reminiscent of God inviting us to create and influence creation alongside him, where it's okay, I have the option to volunteer at my church, and I might do that, or I can just leave it for someone else to do it. But the potential reality is someone's going to volunteer and someone's going to help fill in this need in this church. But if I say yes to filling in this need, I get to influence how that need is filled, influence what happens from there, because I'm actively participating in this choice, and that's going to influence how this church is shaped by me choosing to fill in this need, and me bringing in my personality, my feelings, my imagination into this space, blah blah blah. And now this potential reality is turned into a more real reality based on the choice I made to step in and volunteer.
My question stands from like, what's the deal with him being able to affect his present time? Because he's able to remove the ropes, and like that's where we see like the paradigm shift of like, oh, what they're saying is not completely the case. So what's...
It's a bit like the how time travel works, like in say Back to the Future.
Okay.
Where it's like, okay, if you make a choice now, you're affecting future people now. And so they are, so you have so he put the ropes, Cliff put the ropes on him, whether or not those ropes or crystal lights were from his time or whether he just did it. And so Jim, by deciding his future, is deciding what someone from the future is going to do to him. And therefore he has that kind of, again, he's experimenting with how much power he has over the reality.
There is no spoon.
So what you're saying is, since like the person Cliff comes from a possible future, his actions within the past are not solid into that timeline, because the main character is still present, and he can act to kind of like negate what a possible person from the future is doing in his present timeline.
Like the other characters are kind of like echoes from the future trying to make their way back to the past and influence the past. So, but the past still has the defining weight.
So basically, they don't really they don't exist in the present. They are there kind of like through this, I think it's through technology, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they are there through technology, so it's not like the natural order of things. So whatever they do,
of things that may be, they are. Do not blame me.
so that's really cool, because it means that if let's compare it to Terminator, right? Terminator comes back to the past, shoots John Connor, and then John Connor, like the mom is like, no, that doesn't happen, and John Connor is not shot. Like,
or it's like Meet the Robinsons, where like the robot AI is defeated when the creator is simply like, I'm not going to create you anymore. Like, I've decided I'm not going to create you. And
it's like that. And and that's again metaphorically, it's Jim understanding the kind of agency he has over his life in a sense. And
actually, that's a good I guess that leads into another good question of like talking about some of these references we're using to understand it. Are there any particular movies or stories or other references that like you had in mind while making this, like that directly inspired it at all?
Not really. A lot of it is just like the soup of what I've grown up in. Like, how do I understand time travel? How does has that fed into my imagination? And again, we've talked about this, like after we finished, like we got out of Avengers Endgame together, we were all like, I think we went with somebody and that person was like obsessing over like, but this doesn't make sense because of this and this. And Nathan was like, it's time travel. It's not going to make sense. I just going in. It's like, yep, they say these are what the rules are.
But the time travel plot, you always have to turn your brain off at least a little.
As long as a movie is following its own logic, then I believe anything that's happening on screen. Once they break that logic, but they don't offer a new explanation, I get frustrated. Because
that's the thing is, so within this, again, I keep some of the rules vague. And it's like, but I do say, here are the rules. And then I have somebody else I can say, like, well, maybe the rules are different. And then I say, yes, this is how it works. And so, exactly.
And that makes a lot, like, it works because I didn't feel frustrated. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I like that concept. It like, because like as someone who watches a lot of time travel stuff and all this multiverse stuff, I love it. That's one of my favorite things. Like Nathan knows, like every tabletop game I do is basically some variety of the multiverse, basically. But it's like I have never seen this before, and that's a compliment. I don't think I've seen something that both includes the probable existence of God within the universe, and also includes the fact that the rules are not known yet, so we can't, even if people present you with some rules, it's just their interpretation of this big concept that nobody can pin down because it is still like in process. Like they just essentially like they stumbled into it through technology, and it's still something, and they focused on like the wrong thing of like we have to change the past, and it's like this idea of like, yeah, that's what everybody thinks about when they have the power to time travel. It's like, I want to change the past, but it's like, or I want to change my future, right? But it's like,
but what about the present?
Exactly. What about the present? Like it's like I believe in this a lot, but like I like the idea of time travel where it doesn't, it like people form like specific rules for like, we will not affect the past, we'll observe the past so we can learn from it. I like that. Like that's one of my favorite ways of like time travel, of like we're not gonna, and that's one of my ideas that I've had of like a time traveling story, is people who essentially like are able to go to the past, but they can't affect the things going on in that period, because it's essentially like you can only see what happened but not be part of it. Like that's what I've always interpreted, and that, but you can actually go to the future and interact with the future because it hasn't happened yet. It's a possibility of what has happened, but it has to be your future, not just like a general future essentially of someone else. Like
that's one of the fun things about, again, playing in these sci-fi sandboxes, is you can imagine what the rules could be and explore that in your own way.
And yeah, the great unique thing about your movie is that it does, unlike the other stuff that we talked about, this movie considers the past and the future, but it still remains very present, and that's where a lot of the weight and the power comes in. And I think that's where a lot of, and going back to like all we talk about with communication, that's where real life-giving communication comes in, is when both people are present in the moment. You can't get too caught up about what was said or done in the past or where you think things might go. You can consider those things, of course, but you can't let that take away from what you're trying to say and communicate in the present, because what you say and do in the present is still what's most important right now, because that influences where things will go.
Well, that's exactly, that's where we actually have power. I mean, one of the things that I always thought was so cool that the medieval church did and the Renaissance church did is build these incredible cathedrals that would then, have paintings. The Sistine Chapel that says, here's what all of reality is. There's God at the top. There's how he interacts with humans. There's angels. There's heaven and there's hell. And then here's your spot in here. In this whole cosmology, I'm going to tell you what the whole universe is like, and I'm going to tell you what's your place in it. And that is such an amazing, beautiful thing that we as storytellers can do, is say, because all we really can do is interact with the present. And that's the only place where we have power. We have no power over the past. And at whatever degree we have power over the future, it's only in the choices we make in the present. But
it's like the big universal map, the map we're talking about. This is the "you are here" sign. Yes. You are here, and that's good.
And what we can do, you can make, again, two mistakes. You can either say the map of the cosmos doesn't matter, because no, you need to have a map of the cosmos to know what direction you're going in on the map, and to know, okay, I'm only going to get to this, amount of space, cross this amount of space, but I need to know what the rest of it is so I know what direction to go. Or you can spend so much time on the rest of the universe, you neglect to walk the spaces you can make in the forest on your map space. And so what I one of the things I love in stories is stories that take ordinary lives and pull back to show the transcendent. What is our place in this universe? But then come back and say, okay, now that you know your place in the universe and the weight that your choices have, now bridge that gap and make that choice. Again, one of the things I got to do, which was really fun, and I would love to do this more in other films in a bigger way, with a bigger budget, with more whatever. But one of the things I loved was having a kiss in the story, and the kiss then goes back to the past and then to the future and then comes back to the present. And just doing that with these shots that I did where it's like, that's all of the past and present, the future is contained in this one choice to reconcile in this way. And that to me comes the closest to summing up the imaginative weight I wanted to give the story.
Now, one of the things that I also wanted to ask right about the end is the fact that the character kind of sees Cliff and then he sees the future version of his family. Like, my question is, like, because I was seeing him more like as his imagination, basically, of it, right? But like in the Cliff scene, it seems like he's actually interacting with Cliff. So my question was he able to? Was there in a way he was able to interact with Cliff through this like experience that he's having?
So I think the way I understand it, and again, I'm keeping this vague in terms of as we don't understand how the multiverse works and how our interaction with the multiverse exactly works. But I see it as Jim, because he has been able to bridge that gap between the potential futures that exist and the potential futures he can imagine. And by making the choices he has, those become more real and more solid, those potentialities, those futures. Then I was seeing him being able to, in the same way that when we make a choice to get married to someone, we can see the future that is possible, that becomes more clear and more vivid. We take this job and we see bits of it, we are able to say, okay, this future is more clear and more vivid. He's doing that in a closer to literal way because he has learned to bridge that gap through his experiences. Now, how closer to literal is it versus him simply imagining it? I don't know the answer to that question. But again, it is that midpoint between, again, the dreams being simply his dreams and them being real realities that he's interacting with. But again, like I said, it's not quite as real as what he experienced the previous night, because it's like, again, with the tree, he's seeing his family, the tree, and some of them see him and some of them don't. Particularly Kathy doesn't see him, and he doesn't see himself, but he sees his kids. And then he does with Cliff, he sees he's actually able kind of to travel to that travel to that midpoint, that place where he is, and have an interaction with him before it comes out. So that's, again, kind of part of this unmapped out territory of how the multiverse works and its interaction with being a future we can imagine and a future that's actually a reality.
Yeah, the way I took it when I was watching, I was like, okay, so he tapped into this, like the way kind of it works and the way he thinks it works, so he's able to interact with these possibilities because he had a connection with these specific people. That's how I took it. Like I think
that's a very valid, way of describing it.
And he's able to see that into this, like, and step into it for a second and then come back. Like, he's not, like, the way I saw it was like, and this is just my interpretation based on everything. Like, I saw it's like, oh, maybe God is giving him like a little moment with these people before he continues on his life. That's
he's having a Neo moment. He's starting to believe.
Well, again, if I ever did a sequel, and I don't expect to, but if I ever did a sequel, and it's like, okay, what I would have to start saying, okay, maybe let's map out this territory. How does this work? Like, is this kind of mind slipping something that's they can interact with and control, or is it just something mysterious that they can't ever, get their finger on? Does it only work when you have like the technology, like all those things? I'd have to actually map out that territory a little bit more if they were going to go back. But this is unmapped territory right now.
It made me think of Everything Everywhere All at Once, that wants to like they understand like everything, and then but I love that this is like the opposite of the message of that movie, because that movie is beautiful, but it's like the message of that movie is like nothing matters, there's for everything matters, while we believe kind of like the opposite. We believe that everything.
That's
like,
the thing is that
everything matters.
That's a great example of it's a postmodern answer to a postmodern problem with a postmodern imagination, because Dan Harmon. And Nathan has heard me quote this a lot on the Overthinkers. But Dan Harmon, who created Rick and Morty, he explicitly says that while the fact that nothing matters while true does not help you. If you pull out and look at all of reality, nothing means anything. But if you zero in on a family and your relationships with each other, then that can matter to you, and it matters to you in terms of how you experience and live your life. And so Everywhere Once, their message was, hey, yes, look out as in the big picture, nothing matters. But for you, in your lives, with you individuals, this is going to matter to you, regardless of how you feel about reality in your individual life. So make that a good reality. And honestly, for working with a postmodern imagination, that's a beautiful way to talk about the world.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful movie. I'm actually shocked that the Academy awarded it for Best Picture. It was so good. But what I think is, that's what, to me, as a Christian, I want to bring to the table is, can I bring a Christian imagination to these postmodern problems and create a different solution, a different way to imagine the world that solves the conundrums we live in a postmodern world. And
I think the difference with the Christian imagination versus the postmodern imagination is like, yes, in both imaginations, we're looking at the big, we're looking at the transcendent, then looking back at the small. In the postmodern imagination, it says, okay, with the context of the big and the context of this cosmos, the small, the where we are, that's not important. That's technically not important, but we find it important to us anyway. Or the Christian imagination is saying, no, this actually still is important. Like, we're showing you the big and we're showing you where you are in reality, but that's still doesn't make it you or what you believe in or what you care about any less important. We're just showing you where you are so you can go in the direction you're supposed to go in.
Well, so this is, I want you to add to this, Raymond, but I just want to say, because Nathan, you went through our episode where we talk about this. This is one of the benefits to me that I see of being a believer. And when I would, kind of to your audience, I don't know what your audience makeup is like, but if there's people who are not Christians, the audience, one of the things I pitch to you is that the great thing about being a Christian is that you don't have to gaslight yourself about your experience all the time. Because we experience our choices as if they matter and our lives are meaningful. We experience love, truth, beauty, and goodness as real things we're interacting with and discovering and building our lives around. And the perspective of someone like Dan Harmon, who I think is a brilliant writer and stuff like that, is he has to say, yeah, I know really things don't matter, but I have to act like they do and experience them as if they do. So reality and my experience have to be completely different. Whereas for a religious person, you say, no, the reality you experience, that, free choices matter, that love is real, that beauty is real, all those things, that you don't have to constantly tell yourself, this is, I experience this way, but that's a complete fiction. You can say, no, my fundamental experiences of reality are actually reflective of reality. And that's a beautifully freeing thing.
The transcendent still cares about that.
And that's the thing that we see in movies like time traveling movies. The whole point that it was before, right, is that the choices of people did matter. Like, whatever people chose to do could have changed the world entirely. So, like, you're bringing that back to time travel and the multiverse, which is something that has been like kind of like thrown aside in most other stories, is that like no, it doesn't matter that much, right? And even Terminator did it. It's like, oh no, John Connor doesn't matter. Like anyone can be John Connor. So it's like, and before it was like, no, like John Connor is important because he's the one that's gonna start the revolution. He's the one, like his life is important. So we've kind of removed that because we have this new thought of like, no, like our lives matter. What we do as people matter in this small space, but nothing matter. You do not affect the universe. Like we have formed this idea, but as Christians, we believe that although we don't have all power, and although like not all of our decisions will affect how the history works and how history will come to be, if humanity acts together, we do affect what happens next. Like there is an effect on the universe. There is an effect on the world. The conversation that you have with your neighbor is meaningful, not just because it is a conversation that you're having with someone. It is because that person could be the person that cures cancer. Like, like that's the thing. It's like everyone has the potential to do something great, and you don't know who that person is. And yeah, equally, people have the potential to be evil and do the evil things, right? Like, so you don't know who's going to be good and who's going to be evil. And that has also been a lot of question within time travel stuff of like, what, like, is it morally okay to take away someone's lives, even though we have a possibility of what future it could lead to, but is it better to, instead of killing that person, have a conversation with them and see if the future changes based on that conversation, based on what they needed, based on a hug? Like that's the thing. It's like there are people who are legitimately gonna go out there and be evil, right? But if somebody comes and has a genuine connection with them, they could completely change their worldview, and the possibility of that evil future may just crumble apart because
it's
someone.
So funny, like it's like Tom Cruise movie, which was Spielberg and Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report, where it's like they know who's going to kill people and who's going to do murders, and so that they jail them before they start. That's not a spoiler. That's the premise of the movie, by the way. But it is kind of like why is it that they have to like jail them? Why can't they just like give them a hug or something?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Because like again, we had this potential as humans, but we can't really tap into that potential in a vacuum. Like we do it together. And I think when it comes to like thinking about stories like these, or just existentialism in general, I think we as individual humans are so quick to write ourselves off because we feel like we need, as individuals, we need to have this influential power, and like by ourselves, and because we don't have this influential power by ourselves to change the universe, we think, oh, well, we're not special, we're not important, so therefore none of this matters because I can't do any of this. Like I can't impact the entire universe by myself.
That's an excellent point that you're both bringing up, is because the reason that we feel like our lives don't matter anymore is because we're so isolated from each other. When we're in relationships with other people, we're like you said, we can do more together than we can apart. So our choices can affect a lot more things. But also, I see the effect I have on you every day. I see the changes that in you, and I see your changes in me. So my life feels automatically. This is why, by the way, parents always rate their lives as more meaningful than people who don't have kids. Because it's like, well, you're literally like seeing the effects of your choices on another human being every single day. So of course your life is going to feel more meaningful. And again, and that, which is a separate thing from happiness, which is a whole other thing. But that's the thing, is if you feel like your life is not meaningful, it's probably because you don't have close-knit relationships with other people. Because that you get to do more. You can do so much more in the world than you together than you can apart. So again, like the reason that I have had a podcast for the past 5 years is because I have a co-host, Nathan Clarkson, and I have a producer, sound guy, technical wizard, Nathan Scher. And it's like, well, I don't do that alone. I do that with other people. And I've had an impact on the world because of that. But also because I have seen these people over time and watched is grow. Again, Nathan has said, hey, Joseph, here's a way that you've changed me. And I'm like, wait, really? That's amazing. Like, and then I can tell him about the ways he's changed me, and he can observe that in me. Mm-hmm. And so I would say to people, again, if you feel like your life is meaningless, maybe that's not a reflection of reality. That's a reflection of the fact that you should go and love and be loved by more other mm-hmm. people. And again, as you said, Raymond, there are difficulties and problems with the fact that we can so customize our lives and our relationships now that we don't necessarily know our neighbors because we are, find the people who live in, Timbuktu, Kansas online. There are problems with that. But the advantage of saying is like, okay, if you don't have people that you connect with, find those people. Mm-hmm. And you can do that with the internet. You can do that with, again, wherever you live, find the places where people gather and build those real life relationships with those people. Because not only will your life feel more meaningful, you will actually be a part of repairing the world that's become broken.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, as individuals, we are technically not special. Like, you are technically not special, but at the same time, we are necessary, and we are necessary to each other. And Ray Ray, I know this because Ray literally got done telling me this like not too long ago. Like, I have a screenshot of this message that he sent me that I feel like sums this up very well. But what he told me is, and I quote, "You are always necessary, even if you make one person smile. Every time you serve others, you are the most important person in the kingdom of heaven. I know you know this, but I'll say it again. You are not special, but when you serve others, you are essential. You matter to God, and you matter to me, because you make me smile. You are a true friend. You are necessary." And that, I think, is just reality right there for everyone. We're not special, technically, in the grand scope of things, but we are here, we are necessary, because we are meant to tap into this potential that God created us for with each other. It's all interconnected.
Thank you for quoting me. I was about to say the exact same thing, and it's better that you quoted me because that makes me feel incredible.
I knew once I knew this conversation was going this direction, I'm like, I need to pull it up. Like, this is the perfect way to round it out. Like, I have to say it.
But I was gonna say that just to cap it off, the themes of sacrifice and also what's the word? Happy medium, finding a happy medium, was really interesting in this story as well. Like, how the daughter is like, she wants to, like, she is okay with sacrificing herself so her dad can have a happy life. But within that, she, like, that's such a fascinating thing to me with talking about sacrifice, right? Because it is beautiful, like, and this doesn't go contradict our Christian beliefs. We believe that sacrifice is beautiful, and it's something that it is wonderful, but we also believe that it has to be the right sacrifice, not just anyone, but the right sacrifice. And sometimes people can sacrifice themselves for the wrong reasons. And that's okay to present as well in a Christian film or in a Christian world. So, like, I am, like, Joseph, like, I love that. Like, I love you presenting, like, well, she's not making the right sacrifice, because, like, even if she thinks it's a selfless sacrifice, it's coming from a place of she thinks she's the worst thing in the universe, and that her existence will help the world be better. And that is not
It's a one-sided conversation.
Like, and I love that. It's because that is usually, and I was talking to Nathan about this a year, I don't know if it's been a year already, but about the Umbrella Academy. The problem with the Umbrella Academy and its ending is that it's the wrong sacrifice, because it essentially tells us, even if they are meant to be Messiah figures, they're not. And that's the problem. They're not Messiah figures. They do not represent Messiah very well. Therefore, like, they're broken people. They need a Messiah. They need someone to help them. And their sacrifice meant nothing, because we we saw ourselves in them. We saw the brokenness of our humanity in them, and the fact that they decided to sacrifice them at the end to save the universe, to save the multiverse, it was not satisfying, because we wanted them to find happiness. We didn't want them to be sacrificed. We wanted them to find Eden. We wanted them to find Eden, not sacrifice themselves so that everyone else got Eden.
It's basically saying the universe is better off without you and your humanity and your brokenness. So leave and things will get better. It's like, no,
that's the thing, is that you talk about the right sacrifice. The right sacrifice is to see something beautiful in the world and want to sacrifice yourself because you think that will preserve what's beautiful in the world. And you're right, far too much of sacrifice today is built around self-hatred rather than other love. Where it's like, the world would be better if I didn't exist because there's something ugly about me. And instead of saying, I can draw the line where it's like, okay, look, I'm on the Titanic, and I know that if I don't get on that boat, somebody else can get on that boat, and I want to save their lives because I think that their lives matter, so I'm going to do that. Rather than saying, I don't want to get on that boat because I think that the world is better off without me here.
Yes.
And far too much of sacrifice today that I observe is built around that kind of self-hatred. So I love the fact that you highlighted that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really, really important to bring back that idea of going like, no. Not all sacrifice is like good. There is a good sacrifice and a sacrifice that is not satisfying. Because even with Jesus' sacrifice, there was still a silver lining, the resurrection, him coming back from the death. Because it's not about only the death and the sacrifice, it's about the beating of the death, the feeding death itself. So for me, a better ending would have been if the Umbrella Academy were there in the Eden, were there in that new heaven and earth, where we're able to be part of it, even though they were sacrificing themselves to not exist anymore. They were given a second chance to exist in a perfect world.
It's like that one Doctor Who
episode. Again, I haven't watched Umbrella Academy, but I think that one of the, again, because you talked about the fact of how broken the Umbrella Academy is, and that was part of the appeal, is that these are really screwed up people who are, saving the world. And you're right, there is this thing. Again, I've known this with people I know who feel incredibly broken themselves. One of the things that I see is that the people who feel incredibly broken but are actually kind of healthy, who I know, one of the things they don't like is they don't like it when you have incredibly broken people who, quote unquote, find redemption by sacrificing themselves. Because the thing about Jesus that made his sacrifice so good is he was a good person who sacrificed himself for others.
Yes.
But he didn't need to be redeemed himself. When you mix that kind of, I need redemption, and the way I find redemption is through self-sacrifice, then you are saying that, you're better off killing yourself.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so it's because you're mixing the redemption arc with the sacrifice arc, and that is a very toxic combination.
Yes, that's exactly what I was telling Nathan. I was like, that is so wrong, because the message you are delivering to people is kill yourself. It's basically literally that is the message you're delivering to people.
That is a legitimate way to find redemption, is through killing yourself.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
It's like, no, those are two separate arcs. The sacrifice arc and the redemption arc are over on these both sides, and don't mix the two. That's
the only way you actually have a chance to find redemption is through living. So it's like whenever you see a character like a villain character get redeemed, it's only because the hero's like, no, I'm going to let you live, because if I let you live, you're actually going to get a chance to redeem yourself. As opposed to just killing you, there's no redemption in that.
Yeah, make amends.
Really I hadn't really thought about that before. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, everyone needs to live. Doctor Who, this time everyone lives.
Exactly. Like it is far better for people who are broken to make amends. If they did something wrong, they need to fix it. They need to make amends, not sacrifice themselves completely, but still exist and try to fix it through a better way, a different way that needs to be found, basically. And like, I feel like that pretty much sums everything up. I think like this experience that you built, it's great, and I am excited to see more movies made by you, because it really does.
Movies specifically, I've been told.
What was that? What did you say? Sorry, my bad.
Specifically, 2 more movies, I've been told.
Yeah, according to Google AI.
So, hopefully not. Hopefully it's more than 2. But yeah, no. I really hope that
We'll
that
see
you can.
what the future says. Sorry.
Let's hope that. And I offer myself. Hey, if you ever need art for the movies, Friendly Studio is always there for you. If you ever need art, sound design or music, I'm always there for you.
Thank
just
you
let
so
me
much.
know.
I really appreciate that. It really matters that again, we can do more together than we can apart. I appreciate having people like you in my corner always.
And as always, I offer my reluctant talents to your endeavors.
Thank you.
I think it's really important, and I like that as Christians in this field, we learn to put aside our own, like, because we all have different projects. I've noticed a lot of Christian. We all have our own projects. We love our own writing. We want to create something out there, but I think it's also important to put those aside for a bit and help our other brothers and sisters with what they are doing, what they are producing too. That's why like Friendly Studios is about that. Like I want people to come in and also make their own things, and I'll help them do that. Like that is what the purpose that I have for it is. And not only like Christians, I also want anyone who also ascribes to the same values that Friendly Studios has will produce things in that way. So yeah, like thank you so much, Joseph, for coming to our show once again. You are our only guest right now.
And we're really grateful for you.
And we are really grateful for that.
And I'm
but
sure
yeah,
we'll see you on again soon for either, I don't know, the next season of My Adventures Superman or Supergirl or any other comic book related stuff.
Oh, we're probably, yeah. Most
I look
forward
to it.
Did you watch the Supergirl trailer?
I did. I'm really excited for Guardians of the Galaxy 4.
I've seen that being thrown around a lot. But you know, I'm excited to see if it actually like it's different from that. Like, but yeah, right now it just
I mean, again, like it's an easy joke, but like, yeah, it looks good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad for Supergirl to finally be getting her due, and so
yeah. I'm so excited for that. So I guess if nothing else comes before that, Superman related, or if you're making another movie, like see you then, Joseph.
Truth, justice, whatever. I see you in the multiverse.
Do your thing, Nathan.
Wahoo!